The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Cultural Competency Webinar 3, Principles of Community Engagement. It is 2 o'clock, so we are going to get started in about 2 or 3 minutes. We'll wait to see if anyone else is going to join us, and we will get started shortly. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome. This is webinar, Cultural Competency Webinar 3, Principles of Community Engagement. It is part of the NAMI Cultural and Linguistic Competence series. It is a 3-part series, but you do not need to take all of the classes or take them in order, though I would definitely recommend them all. But this is the 3rd one, but that is totally fine. If you haven't taken the first one, and we haven't even offered number 2 yet, so don't worry about that. These webinars can be taken on their own. So my name is Catherine Chivers, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at NAMI, California. I was actually trained by Pooja Chanda, which is the doctor who NAMI California collaborated with to create this cultural competency webinar series. So I want to thank you all first before we really get into it. Just thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to dedicate to learning about cultural competency. That is really great, and I know you all are super busy people, and sometimes cultural competency can just kind of seem like one more thing or one more burden, but I think it's so wonderful that we're taking time out of our day to really dedicate ourselves to that, and I really hope that what we discussed today is going to be helpful for you personally and for your organizations or affiliates. So I do want to say that I hope that we can all be really present during this webinar. Like I said, I know we are all really busy, but if we're going to get the most out of this webinar, it's definitely best. I love to make it as interactive as possible. I do have some polls, so I'm going to really be wanting to hear from you to help guide the conversation as well. There is a questions box on your screen, so if you have a question for me, please let me know. If throughout the webinar you have a comment or a question that you would like to say verbally that you feel is relevant for the whole audience, just shoot me a message and I can take you off mute because you automatically all start on mute, and I can unmute you and then you can ask whatever a question or comment is, and because we would love to hear from you. So for the polls, if you're watching this on a computer, you can either pull up another web browser page, or you can also do this on your smartphone, as long as you have cell phone or, I believe it's cell phone or internet access, but don't quote me on that. Or it may just be cell phone service, but you can do it via text message, so that's a pretty easy route to respond to the polls as well, and I'll go over that in just a moment, because we're going to start off with a poll. Okay, so I do like to start out with just some brief group commitments. We are going to be talking about some pretty sensitive subjects today, and so that is can sometimes, make it more difficult, but I really want us to all kind of be on the same page when we're going into it. So just listening attentively, listening to one another. If a peer has something to say, having an open mind and speaking honestly, and making sure that we're sharing the space. It's not in person, so we really won't have to worry about this as much. These webinars tend to have a pretty small number of attendees, and so the more you can participate and speak, the better. I don't think we'll have a problem with that today. And then confidentiality, leaving any of the names here. This also is being recorded, so if you would like to remain anonymous but still say a comment, that's totally fine. You just don't have to say your name or your affiliate. And then finally, reserving the right to change your mind. Because we all come into, learning with different preconceived notions, and just reserving that right that if you would like to change your mind about something, that's okay. Or if not, that is okay as well. But reserving that right to do so. So I would like us to start off with a poll just to get us thinking. So today we're talking about cultural competency, and I want to hear what you think of when you hear the word community, because this webinar is really focused on the principles of community engagement and how we actually go about engaging communities in our practices and programs and working with them. So for those of you that haven't done one of these polls before, they're actually pretty cool. So I'm going to go through. So this top line, if you look right here, hopefully you all can see my mouse, but it's the top line. It has a little picture of the computer. This is if you're going to respond via a web browser. So you would open up something like Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, or something like that. And where you would type the URL in, you're going to type in poll, POLLEV.com/NAMI California. Note, it's not California. They leave the IA out. NAMI California 886. And then it will bring you to a page where you can go ahead and type in your answers. Alternatively, if you want to use your smartphone, it's the line below. And this is a little confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. Where you type the telephone number or where the contact would normally go when you're sending a text message, the phone number is just going to be 22333. And then in the body of the text message, where you would normally write some sort of a message to whomever you're texting, you're going to write NAMI California 886. Once you do that, you're going to press send. You're going to send NAMI California 886 to 22333 number. And then it's going to come back and say, welcome, you've joined NAMI California's poll. Please go ahead and type, and then you can just type leave whenever you want to leave the poll at the end of this session. But what I would like you to then type in, and you'll just text it or type it in on the web browser, is any words or phrases that you think of when you hear the word community. So hopefully this is going to the idea is to make a word cloud, but we'll only do that if we hear from you all. So I'd love to to have us take a minute and hear your responses so that we can really start out just getting us thinking about cultural competency and community and those type of things. So please message me if you are having trouble. There will be more polls, and they're really helpful for me to, get feedback from you all, and also for you all to just be an active part of this conversation, because it's hard because with the webinars, I feel like the whole time I'm just talking at you, and I really, don't want to do that. I really want to hear from you all. So again, pull up your web browser and type in pollev.com/NamiCalifornia886 to type in responses. Again, these are words or phrases that come to mind when you think of the word community, just what comes off the top of your head. Alternatively, you can do the text message, and you're going to, the phone number is going to be 22333. In the body of the text message, type NAMI California 886. And then you're going to type in whatever words or phrases come to mind when you think of community. And if you've successfully completed that, they're going to show up on our screen. So I will give you all a minute or two to, awesome, wonderful, someone came in, perfect, local, okay, great. Keep them coming. But please feel free to give as many responses as you would like. And if we have duplicates, that is okay. The words will actually get bigger. So that's pretty cool to see that other people are thinking about those things as well. So awesome. One individual, it looks like, was able to come in, and I'll wait, and hopefully we will hear from some more of you. Okay, so if any of you all are having trouble, please let me know. I know sometimes it can be, I was a little frustrated the first time I had to figure this out. So please let me know. But I really do want to stress that I really am here for you all. And so I would love to really hear from you. Okay, so it looks like we have some individuals who haven't been able to log into the poll. Thank you for your question. So I'm going to try and troubleshoot with you verbally. So let me just answer this individual's question then. If we can't get on, oh, yes, okay, awesome. We have more people that are able to get on. This is awesome. So I'm just going to help this one individual, and then we'll start moving on after that. Also, if you hear me type in, I know some people don't really know what's going on, but it's just me answering another participant's question. I'm going to go through it one more time. So if any of you are having trouble, and for those of you who have already gotten on, wonderful, bear with me. For one more time, so it's going to be the top. If you're using your computer, you're going to pull up a web page, Firefox, Chrome, anything like that, Internet Explorer, where you type out the URL. You're going to type, okay, so the individual who's having troubleshooting, hopefully you can hear these verbal instructions. You're going to type in poll.ev.com/NamiCalifornia886, where you would type the URL, and that is going to bring you to the page where you can type in different answers. Alternatively, if you want to use your phone, you are going to, where you put the phone number, type 22333, and in the body where you would normally write your text message, you're going to write NAMI California 886. Okay, so this is wonderful. If you all haven't been able to get on the poll this time, please keep shooting me messages, and we'll try and troubleshoot that. For the sake of time, I'm gonna going to see what our answers are here and then start to move on, but we will have other polls, and I'd really love to hear from everyone. If you're really having trouble and it's just not working out and my troubleshooting isn't helping you, you can always type in the questions your answer if you feel comfortable. I will not name you by name, but at least then I can include your response in the responses that are shown. So looks like we have community. We have time first, phone. It looks like maybe some via. Looks like maybe some people were. I'm not sure if that has to. The phone has to do with community, but who knows? Maybe that is a type of a virtual community is a type of community, so maybe that's what they're referring to. Local, okay, nice. We have some different ideas. So let's go on. It looks like some people had some trouble or may have put in alternative words, and that's totally fine. So shoot me a message if you're having any trouble. Okay, so when we think of community, these are some of the things that come to mind. And so what I really want us to think about today is defining what are the key features of a community, what makes up a community, and how our community is really diverse because of the features that make it up. What are the principles of community engagement, best practices for engaging communities, and kind of it's called the spectrum, but kind of the different levels of community engagement. Are you simply, handing out flyers and saying that a resource is available, or are you partnering with a local community organization to do certain work? There's different levels of it. And we're going to talk about some strategies and then previous pitfalls that some organizations, have done or that have happened in the past for engaging communities that are not helpful, and then ultimately help you all through providing some resources that can really help you to guide your future outreach and to better engage especially communities that are diverse communities or communities to which you are not a member or to which maybe your organization doesn't have as much experience engaging that will be more helpful for you all to learn about. So we're going to start off with part one, going over some key terminology, some kind of basic strategies, and then part two, we're going to discuss some community engagement efforts, like I said, some pitfalls, some successes and challenges, and then finally just go over really kind of highlights and takeaways from the webinar. And I really do want to reiterate that please throughout this whole time, if you have any sort of questions or I hope you all can participate in the polls, but if not, just shoot me a question and I can help you. Alternatively, if you'd like to speak, like I said, please let me know. We'd love to hear from you. So let's go over some key terminology first, so we're all kind of on the same page with like a working knowledge of these terms, and then we're going to explore the value and structure and mindfulness of your approach, which is really to say, how are you engaging diverse communities? So what, why, how? Perfect. Okay. So what do we mean by community? I really wanted to start with that word cloud to get you all thinking about what community is. And there are really four common approaches. So there's, these are kind of analytical approaches. So there's the systems perspective, which is really saying that you can think of it kind of like almost like a community is an organism, and that each part of a community is made up of certain parts that are made to do a certain job, i.e. the heart pumps blood, the muscles help you move, and etc. Such things like that, such that everything within a society is kind of, or a community is interrelated and has kind of their own role to work together to make this larger community. We also have a social perspective, which was really focused on looking at the networks and linkages between individuals, which is a pretty common way of thinking about community, but it's really looking at those relationships between people within a community. The virtual perspective is really just taking into account the whole online community, because we think of community a lot as by geography, like someone in the beginning of the word cloud said local. And so we oftentimes think of it in terms of geography and the virtual perspective as saying, well, there's really this whole other community that and sub-communities that are all over the internet and through virtual reality, social media, and things like that. And then finally, there's the individual perspective, which is basically saying that individuals will have their own sense of community, and they will most likely, each individual is a part of multiple communities, and that really their own sense of community can change over time and fluctuate, and is ultimately defined by the individual. So what do we even mean by community engagement? Bear with me through this. I'm going to have to read a couple things off slides, but I really don't like to, and I know that's not fun to listen to at all. So some of these, just so we have a working knowledge of them, but I'll really try and stay away from that as much as possible. So bear with me. I do apologize for when I do have to read off some slides, because I know that's not super fun, so I'll try to keep it to a minimum, but it is good just so we're all on the same page with certain definitions. So community engagement, the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, special interest, or other situations. And ultimately, the goal should be affecting the well-being of the people, ideally in a positive way. And so it's a really good tool for bringing about change, behavioral change, and also for, especially in the work that NAMI does, for engaging unserved and underserved communities, especially communities that are considered marginalized or less privileged than some mainstream communities. And it's really about building these partnerships and coalitions between communities to really create this change and help to pool resources and knowledge and to really effectively engage communities to create change. Because if we as outsiders go into a community to which we are not a part of, it's not going to be very effective if we just go in and tell them what to do without really knowing anything about the community, because what we're telling them may be really relevant to us and our needs as an organization, but we haven't tailored it to their needs as a certain community. So it's really about how can we create this partnership so that ultimately we're going to make our work more effective to ultimately make your community a more positive one, or have your community have more access to whatever services we are providing for you or seek to provide. So it's really important to focus on this collaborative approach and the idea of with and through. So not for groups, because although we want to obviously, ultimately provide some sort of a service, whether it's our, certain programming or providing resources or such, true community engagement that's really effective is going to work with and through people, not just for or at them, because we really want to involve them in the process, because this is going to be the only way we can actually create effective and long-lasting change that is going to be meaningful for these communities. And those stuff I've already touched on, so we'll move on from that. So there's different types of community engagement. There's groups, agencies, institutions, individuals, online platforms, other things like that. And so it can really be seen as this continuum of engagement. And so this is the graphic I was looking for. So over here, I'll start out on the left. So we have outreach, and then it goes all the way over to shared leadership. So on the left, we have community engagement that is kind of the least amount of community engagement. And then as we move from left to right on the continuum, we have more and more a deeper engagement with that community until it becomes shared leadership. So if you start to outreach, there's some community involvement. It's really that communication is flowing from said organization to the community, but there really is no feedback or not very much from the community. So you're maybe giving them information, but you're not really asking for feedback or if this information is relevant to them, and those type of things. And kind of the entities are coexisting separately. And this can help if you want to just spread knowledge, but not really have the community be a part of your organization or change, or vice versa. The community may not really want you to be a part of their efforts, and so it's pretty separate. And then as you move along, you have consult, which is a little bit more involvement, and there's some kind of back and forth flow of information, but still not that much. And then involve, getting more community involvement. There's a visibility of partnership established with increased cooperation between two. And then finally collaborate. We're having a bi-directional flow of communication, so it's really a back and forth, not just one talking at the other. And this is really going to create some true partnerships, and really requires trust building. And then finally is shared leadership, which is the strongest form of community engagement, and almost shouldn't be called community engagement, because it's really co-leadership now, because these entities are working together, and actually the final decision is really that of the community, really deciding what the community wants. A type of research is community-based participatory research, and that would be an example of shared leadership, where for example, a researcher is going in and trying to do a project, but ultimately, instead of they may come in with their ideas, but they're going to ultimately let the community at the end of the day direct the study or the research or where it really wants to go. So there are pros and cons to this, because if you have a certain agenda, or say you are under a grant or a contract, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to have shared leadership with another organization or community, simply because you have tasks you already need to achieve, and there's only so much wiggle room you have. And so that's where maybe outreach or consult would be better. And then shared leadership is really like when you are able to take to heart fully what the community has to say, even if it is different than what your original goals were. So there are really pros and cons to all these different levels, based on ultimately what you're trying to achieve, and how you're trying to engage or help the community. So it's really this focus on relationships, and having an ongoing process that's really built on trust. I cannot stress enough throughout this presentation how far investment in learning about the community and getting to know individuals from whatever community you seek to engage, whether those are formal or informal leaders, and building trust and respect with them is going to go a long way. And you're ultimately going to be more able to implement your goals, and it's going to be more effective because you're going to be hopefully getting more feedback from the community, and they know what's best for them. And so that's why listening and forming this relationship is really key to successful community engagement. So a lot of times we wonder why we even want to do community engagement, because community engagement is really hard. It takes a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of commitment. Like I said, it's a relationship and an ongoing process, so it's not something we can just develop overnight. It really takes a lot of manpower and time and resources. But ultimately, community engagement is going to give you some really lasting true effective change if you're able to effectively partner with communities. And to do that, you really need to involve at every level of your engagement those community members which you are trying to engage, because going in and telling the community what they need is going to be very irrelevant for the community, because obviously that community knows best what they need. So you're going to be able to make this lasting change if you're really listening and building trust with that community, and then seeing how you all can negotiate based on their needs, and based on your initiatives or what you're trying to get done to really make that lasting change within the community. And that's where it really ties into the second point of having to be relevant, because if you have these great ideas for, we'll take like peer-to-peer classes, for example, and you're going into a community and they're like, we don't need peer-to-peer classes. We need mental health 101. Like, we don't even know, what these certain mental illnesses are, and that's just not relevant for us. We need to know what mental illness is first before we even have, support groups. And so obviously you're not going to have effective change because you're going to be giving something that the community doesn't really even find relevant to their goals. So that's why it's so important to listen and find out what their needs are. And especially for the change to actually be lasting and not temporary, because so often it can be very tempting to go in and kind of throw certain information at a community or give them something you're not really sure if that's actually relevant to them. It's not going to create lasting changes because the community is most likely going to find it irrelevant or not well thought out, or maybe they won't even trust you as an outsider. So if any of you have done the first webinar, this is really what the Cultural Competency one, it's called Mental Health 101 for Diverse Learners. And that whole webinar is really about effective public speaking, being very similar to community engagement. And this webinar touches on that a little bit. So some of the skills that you can think about. So say you're public speaking, and so you have these different type of skills. There's knowledge of the subject, you're organizing your topics, there's your message, there's your target audience, knowing your community, knowing your audience, knowing your subject matter. And so it's really very similar to when you are engaging, when you are engaging communities, because all of these things are relevant. So subject knowledge, knowing about your subject, knowing about your audience, knowing the community, knowing their needs, knowing how to engage your audience effectively, knowing how to make your presentations entertaining and relevant to those people, and how to have a clear, direct message that is really going to speak to those individuals in a way that is culturally and linguistically appropriate for them, and so that they're actually going to take this message as relevant. So cultural engagement, really helps to improve a lot of outcomes. So all of these, I won't go over all of them, but one of the big ones I would say is definitely ethics. It helps also bring in other communities from the public into your project, and it's going to help you form all different types of relationships with different communities. But community engagement can also be partnering with different organizations, community-based organizations, county level offices, or academic partners, all types of different bodies or entities that you can engage through your community work to ultimately really create lasting change or implementation of some sort of a program or idea or research that is going to hopefully help to create that positive change with whatever your target community is. So just to reiterate, community engagement is really this whole focus on forming relationships. So just as with effective public speaking, you really want to try and form a relationship with your audience to really find out what is relevant to them, what they want to learn, what they find important, and what they value. It's really focused on forming these relationships to gain trust and understanding that these relationships and this trust are going to change and fluctuate over time, and that community engagement is not an easy process, and there may be sometimes where there are misunderstandings, and to understand that you really have to focus on that process and building that relationship rather than always the end point, because sometimes, like I said, there are going to be misunderstandings, and in order to not create resentment towards whatever community you're trying to serve, it's really best to focus on that process and understand that through misunderstandings or through maybe mismatched goals or ideas, you're ultimately going to learn more about that community or group and be able to better tailor your services or needs, and to really focus on how it's a learning process rather than having it detract from your overall mission. And so ultimately, if the change that you have created really is successful, or how I would kind of define success in community engagement is being able to see true, long-lasting, and sustainable change within that community. Whether that is through certain norms changing within the community, or more involvement of the community in your organization, especially when we're trying to reach out to unserved and underserved populations through NAMI, this can be really important. Okay, so how do we implement these concepts? So for successful collaboration, we're going to have to think about, so I'll start off by saying that a lot of times when we think about community engagement, we immediately start to think about the communities that we're going to engage. And obviously we do that because that is a huge part, because we need to learn about them, their values, their leaders, their customs and practices, and ultimately, their culture. And though there's going to be many subcultures and cultures always changing, that information is so important. But we also need to know ourselves in order to know how our interactions are kind of going to go or may be perceived within that community. So a lot of times when we are doing community outreach, if we are outreaching to a certain community that we are not serving enough, or that maybe is really underserved, it is most likely because we're not a part of that community. So those of you who may have staff or volunteers or board members from certain racial or ethnic or different communities, such as veterans or older adults or LGBTQ, if you have members from different communities, it may be easier for those individuals to help to engage in that community because they are considered an insider. So if I'm a veteran and I'm going to try and engage other veterans and have them come to, NAMI Homefront program, it's going to be a lot easier if I am a veteran myself, because we have some shared experiences and I know more about that community. But that being said, if I am not a member of that community, which is going to be a lot of the outreach that we're trying to do because we're trying to get those communities that we're not already serving, that's going to be really hard. And so what we ultimately need to understand and accept is that we most likely will be considered an outsider compared to the communities that we're trying to engage. So it's really important to recognize this and understand that there's maybe going to be some mistrust because we are not identified as members of those communities. And ultimately that shouldn't deter us, but we really need to take that into account, because especially with marginalized communities such as ethnic and racial groups, or by socioeconomic status or sexuality or gender identity, there's really been a huge history of especially outside organizations, especially I would say research organizations, especially I think different universities who have conducted research on marginalized groups and basically just utilized those groups for their own good and ended up doing more harm to the community than good. It has created a lot of mistrust. This is also really big within the medical arena, which we're all really a part of if we're a part of NAMI, and the systemic oppression that has happened against marginalized communities in these medical areas means that if we are considered an outsider, it may be more difficult for us to gain that trust with those individuals. And that shouldn't stop us, but it is something that really needs to be acknowledged if we are going to try and really engage these communities. So we really want to also think about what level do we even want to affect change at? Because like I was talking about before, we have outreach all the way over to shared leadership. And while shared leadership is awesome, it may not be what you want. You may just want to, go to involvement where you want to have two separate entities or organizations existing, but maybe you have some, communication flows back and forth and you're involving this community more. And shared leadership may not be your goal, and that is okay. Shared leadership should not always be the end goal because it may really not be the most helpful aspect. Sometimes it may just be outreach. Especially when you're just starting out with community engagement. You're going to have to go through all of these steps because like I said previously, it's so much a project and built on forming those relationships that it's not going to happen overnight. And it can take years and years to go from outreach to shared leadership if that ultimately is your goal. So what I want to do now is we're going to take a look at an example. So I have a short clip for you all. And so let me just get that up for you while I'm talking. But so what this clip discusses is a UC Davis basically did some studies and found that they were underserving certain populations. And so basically what this, without giving the whole project away, what this is basically a look at how they're trying to engage certain communities that they found to be unserved. And so what I want you to think about while we're watching this video is what level of community engagement is this project trying to start at? Is it outreach, consult, or maybe shared leadership, or any of those along the continuum? But just to kind of get us thinking about, okay, what is their project? What are their needs? Maybe where are they now with community engagement? Where do you think they ultimately want to be one day? Maybe that will be different. So let's take a look.
Mental health resources weren't as readily accessible. I never ever thought to go to an authority figure to talk about my mental health issues because no one ever did that, and it was so stigmatized.
We have the Latino community, the Asian community, largely Filipino. Of course, now the LGBT community is an emerging community in Solano County and in the Bay Area. So we have a very low penetration rate in terms of usage of mental health services.
I think that the challenges that Solano County has are challenges that are in any county.
Now we have to be more in the community and be on the ground working, helping the people to survive in a very difficult environment.
Around high school, I suppressed a lot of my mental health challenges. I didn't really know what depression meant or know what PTSD meant. I just know that that's just issues you don't really talk about, especially growing in a very conservative Vietnamese community.
Based on our data, we have 8,000 medical eligible clients Not all of them have mental health issues, obviously, but we have 200 something clients in Solano County that have that use mental health services right now, the last 2-3 years. That's the data we have. So it's really very low.
In California, we have the Mental Health Services Act, which allows for communities to take stock and invest in innovative transformation of their system. And so Solano County had seen some of the work that we've done with other organizations and reached out to collaborate with us.
This is the dream of researchers like us, that the need comes from the community itself, because they have heard about the things that we have been working on with our center. They decided to call it the cultural transformation model, because what they are hoping to do is truly to transform the way in which services, specifically mental health services, are provided for these three target populations. The beauty about it is that so many stakeholders provided input, valuable input, that now it is a model of Solano County.
So to address the disparities and to improve community mental health, we need more than just a set of standards. The standards can help guide the strategies and solution, but we need an engine to power these efforts. And that engine is people.
Clients can teach us as much as we can teach them, and that we can learn from each other.
Counselors, therapists, psychologists that looked like me, even female-bodied, Asian or queer, I would feel more comfortable approaching my issues.
If you advertise a service that you can provide to the community, that doesn't guarantee, in fact, it doesn't say anything about whether or not those services are actually relevant. Part of the missing factor is trust, building trust. And what that requires is relationship. So it's about engaging with community members, with the community-based organizations, and the county services to develop a sense of community and trust within everybody involved.
We have an outreach coordinator who's a clinician who speaks Filipino, very familiar with the culture, native speaker.
One critical piece about all of this is that the outcomes, the specific metrics that we are going to be using are not going to come from folks like me, who are academicians, and we love to look at metrics and how to measure things. But also we are going to be consulting with the communities themselves and the county and the community-based organizations as to what matters to them.
The county, I think, is moving in the right direction in terms of doing outreach and engagement and partnering with a research institution like UC Davis. We've never done that before. So this is truly an innovative project.
Okay, so hopefully during that you all were able to think a little bit about kind of at what level this is really trying to create change. And I will do, before we move on, I will give a little side plug that some of the speakers are the Dr. Sergio Aguilar Gayola, who spoke there, and actually Dr. Henry Ton, he won't be there this year, but we do have the NAMI conference coming up, and that is at the end of May. And the day before, on Thursday, May 31st, we have the Multicultural Symposium, and Dr. Sergio is going to be there, and he's going to be doing some presentations on some of his community work, and especially related to the California Reducing Disparities Project. But the Multicultural Symposium is free to attend. When I do a follow-up email, I'll send you all the information if you're not already registered, but I would highly recommend going to it, because we have some great people who are really doing this community engagement work and are there to talk about what's working for them and what's not. So if you haven't already, I would definitely recommend signing up for that. Okay, so back to this. So what all, and there really is no right and wrong answer. I just would love to get your thoughts, because you could really take it, you know, from so many different angles. But what level do you think this project is trying to affect change? I think something that was, while you were thinking, if you want to type to me, once again, I won't say your name or anything, but I would love to hear your thoughts. So whether we're thinking outreach, consult, involve, or maybe like an aspect of involve and then an aspect of shared leadership, or what are we thinking? What kind of level is this Solano County project really looking to engage with the LGBTQ, Filipino, and Latino communities? So I don't have a poll for this one, but I would love to hear from you. Go ahead and just type something in the question box. Again, all of this will remain anonymous. I would really just love to hear from you all. It makes it much more exciting than me talking the whole time, to hear all of your thoughts. So take a moment and type something, and I'll give you all like 30 seconds to think about this. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just to get you kind of thinking and get your thoughts about this project. So y'all are leaving me hanging a little bit, but I will, I really, really want to hear from you. I want to say, it is no fun if I just sit here and speak at you, so please. Also, we have a bunch of polls coming up, so I really want to hear from you all. Okay, awesome. It looks like we may have an answer. Okay. Okay, that looks like, never mind, it wasn't an answer, it was another question. That is okay. Let me just respond to this one individual, and then we will talk about this. Okay, so through this project, what I really loved was that Henry Ton really talks about, and we did not plan it this way at all, but talks about some of the key features that are discussed in this webinar. He really talks about that building trust and getting to know the community and understanding that you may be considered an outsider, depending on what community you're trying to engage. If it's not a community you identify with, or maybe like a sub-community you identify with. And so it's so important to create trust, because really, if we think about just on a purely, trying to, every organization is trying to live out or fulfill whatever their mission is. And the only way you're going to do that is if your mission is relevant to those you are seeking to serve. And if it's not relevant, then it's not going to be effective. And I love that he touches on that, because a lot of times we think of community engagement as something that can be, it takes so much resources and time and effort that can be really difficult and overwhelming, but ultimately it's going to help everyone become more successful in their mission through their organization. So since I haven't, let's just make sure. Oh, wait, let's see if we have any responses. Oh, awesome. Okay. Okay, so I do have a question. I'll respond to some of these. So how is the Latino community being served through this project? And then also how are illegal, I believe that person means undocumented, people being served. And I would say that kind of goes to, so I would probably put this at outreach or consult stage. And so I would say that while they're beginning to serve these populations, LGBTQ, Latino, and Filipino, through having, services that are in their language, having clinicians that are from those communities, and doing more outreach. I would say that it's pretty still a lot in the early stages, and that they might not really be there to serving the Latino community. And there's also a sub-community that is, undocumented Latinos or undocumented immigrants in general. And they're right now, you brought up a really great thing that they're not even really touching on undocumented peoples yet. And so they're really more in that kind of outreach where they have some research and some really good intentions, and they're trying to evolve the community, but right now they're really just trying to get the word out there that they have these services. And something that's really was stressed in the video is the need to hear more from those communities about what they need, because I would say that, though they have these efforts, they're still in a very nascent stage, and so they're not, fully serving these underserved populations because they've just, realized that they are underserved. And so now it's a whole kind of other thing. So we have one individual that says, awesome collaboration and partnership within the mental health services available to diverse communities. Yeah, so it looks like that's really what they're ultimately going for. So they may not be there yet, but that is definitely what all of the clinicians and individuals in the video are talking about, definitely, is that they want to collaborate and ultimately partner with these different communities to have them involved at every stage of the process. So that's really important. And thank you guys so much for your thoughts. I really, really appreciate that. So now we are going to go on to some polls, more polls. I love polls. I love to hear from you guys. So once again, if you couldn't figure out the poll, please just shoot me your answer, and I will, if you feel comfortable, shoot me your answer, and I will bring it into the discussion. I will not use your name. I will keep you anonymous, though, of course. And if you are still having trouble with the poll, please let me know, and I can try and help you out. So, before we get there, so it can be really difficult to, understand where your community group or audience is at, because you obviously need a starting point to understand where to kind of go from. And so that's why for webinars, I would say it's even harder, which is ideally I would not be doing this training via a webinar. I think it is way more effective in person. We can have way more interaction with people. But ultimately, this is, what we're having to work with, so that's okay. But that's why I hope that some of you all, I saw that some of you all were able to take the pre-survey, so I could learn a little bit about your learning needs. Pre-surveys can be really helpful. I also sent out a learning needs assessment, which I think only one of you is able to fill that out, and that's okay. But ultimately, those are really valuable tools for me as a trainer to help tailor this lesson to what y'all's needs are, and so that you guys can get the most out of it. So polls, that's why I also really like using polls, because it's a great way, and the polls are completely anonymous, and so they don't link back to, we don't get to see who they're from, which is great, because then you have that a certain level of trust that comes with anonymity to really be able to share your honest opinions. So that's what I really want to go into now, is hearing some of your thoughts, and then we're going to reflect on those a bit. So for this poll, this is a poll A. You're going to write A, B, or C depending on your answer. So rather than creating the word cloud, this time it's going to be like a bar chart. So I'd love for you all to answer this question. So I assess your kind of comfort level. So I feel comfortable recognizing which level of engagement, based on those kind of continuum of community engagement that we saw before, at which level of engagement a project is working at. So it's really kind of like what we just did with watching the video and saying, okay, what level of community engagement is that at? So you can say, A, yes, I feel really comfortable. I've done this work before. Or maybe you're just learning it now, but it's something that comes easily to you. Or maybe B, you're maybe, but I don't really know all the time. And then C, not quite yet, because everyone is hopefully going to get there, but maybe not quite yet. So once again, go ahead if you are on a web browser, go ahead and type in poll.ev/NAMI California 886 into the URL. And then if you are on a phone, you're going to, in the phone number, let me start again. I always make this confusing and I'm trying to make it easier. So let me start again. If you're on your smartphone, where the phone number goes or where you would select your contact, you're going to type 22333. That's where the phone number goes. And it's just those 5 numbers, 22333. And then in the body of the text where you would normally write your message, you're going to write NAMI California 886. And after that, within a couple of seconds, you're going to get a text message back that says that you are, signed up and ready to go. And then you can just text the letter A, B, or C. And then ultimately that will help you, it will help you to show up on this screen. And then you should be all set. Awesome. We have one person that's come in. I really want to hear from more of you. So let me give you a minute. And again, if you're having trouble, shoot me a message and I'll help troubleshoot with you. Awesome. Okay, we have some more individuals coming in. I really want to hear from you guys because, or else, like I've said so many times, it's just me talking at a screen. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you feel comfortable recognizing, the different levels of community engagement and really assessing what level of engagement a project is working at? And it's so important to be able to recognize these different levels of community engagement because you're going to try and align those, and understand how you can align those with your goals as an organization. Because like I said, it may not be everyone's goal to have shared leadership. Your goal may just be that initial step of outreach, depending on what your project is. So I would love to know your comfort level with these. If you've, heard of them before, then maybe you're going to say yes. If not, maybe not quite sure. I'll give you all a couple more seconds. And thank you so much for all the people that have already given us your responses. Okay, so it looks like we have some maybe and some not quite yet. So that is totally fine. We have just kind of introduced these concepts, or maybe some of you have worked with them before, but they're very ambiguous because, like I said before, sometimes there may be an aspect of one level of the project that is consult, and then maybe another aspect that is really just like outreach, or another one that's collaboration. So it can really be a combination of these. So let's go on to another poll. Okay, so I have experience in community engagement. Again, your answer is going to be, you're going to either type A, B, C, or D, or E, depending on how you feel. So I have experience in community engagement. A, you strongly agree, you've done the work, you know what you're doing. B, you agree, but there's always room for improvement. Neutral, maybe a little bit, maybe not really. Disagree as you haven't, and strongly disagree, maybe this is really new for you, and that's totally fine. And this is just to kind of help assess, where you are and to hear from you all. Okay, so great. We're getting some answers in here. So it looks like we have agree, we have some neutral. I'm sure even if all of you don't totally agree, or even if you would say, disagree, maybe you haven't done this work directly, but I'm sure there has been some sort of, community engagement, even if it's engaging a community that you are a part of. That's still community engagement. It's just engaging a community that may be easier to engage because you are considered an insider instead of an outsider and have more of that trust already built with the community. So again, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, I have this on in the background, but I don't really want to, take time to do the polls, I will say please do. You'll get so much more out of it if you do, and I really, really would love to hear from you all. Awesome. Okay, so we have, yes, this is great. Thank you so much. Please send me any answers you have. If you're not able to do the poll, just shoot it to me on the question. So we have one individual that said C, so neutral, okay. When engaging with the, oh no, never mind. Sorry, it was A, because this individual identifies with the Latino community, but was saying that they really want to outreach more to the LGBTQ community, but needs more training and knowledge on how to do so. So that is awesome. Yeah, so it really does depend on, what communities you identify with and where you feel most comfortable. And also, just because you are a member of a certain community doesn't mean that you're going to be comfortable with engaging every individual, because cultures are so diverse, even within a racial or ethnic or sexual or gender identity, and there's so many subgroups that this can all really depend. So I'm going to move on to the next poll. So thank you all of you for able to respond. Let's see if I can, okay, there we go. So I know how to comfortably navigate conflict, in group/community engagement projects. So A, you feel pretty good about being able to navigate conflict, especially pertaining to within groups or community engagements. Agree, maybe you feel good, but you're not totally confident. C, you're not really sure, and that is totally okay. Or maybe D, you disagree and you're like, I'm not there yet, I really don't feel comfortable. Or E, strongly disagree. Maybe this is something you avoid and you really don't want to have to manage conflict, especially within, groups where you may not be a member of that group, or with individuals you don't know that well. That can be very daunting. So I'd love to hear your responses. And once again, you're just going to write A, B, C, D, or E. And so then that will pop up on the screen just like the previous poll. Okay, so we have one strongly disagree. Awesome. I love the honesty, because community engagement is really hard, and it's a really difficult process, and it can be really uncomfortable. And I think that the individual who put strongly disagree has a lot of courage, especially to say that, I'm not there yet, but that's okay. So I really appreciate your honesty and hearing your feedback on this, because it can be very difficult and very daunting for a lot of us. If anyone has any other thoughts, I would love to hear them. Let's see. Okay, I wish we were getting some more answers in, but I understand. If you are able to answer the polls, please do. I can't ask you enough. It makes the presentation a lot better because I get to hear from you all and get your input. So let me know how comfortable you feel navigating conflict, which can be daunting, but some people, feel more comfortable with that, especially navigating conflict within groups and in community engagement projects. So I am going to move on to the next poll, and hopefully if you weren't able to answer this one, you will be able to answer the next one. So my next question is, so I have done a project, or I have a project I am doing, not say or have done or have previously done, that involves community engagement. So how many of you are actively or have actively worked on some sort of a community engagement process? And as well, if any of you want to share about your experiences doing community engagement that you think would be helpful or relevant for other people, or any tips and stuff you may have, please let us know. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you, whether or not you may know it, if you're working for NAMI or volunteering if you're involved with NAMI, I bet you are doing some community engagement. And so that will be wonderful to hear about. Oh, awesome, perfect. So it looks like we got one answer coming in. So someone is doing community engagement. I love it. I'm sure that most of you, whether or not you even recognize it, that you are doing community engagement, because NAMI is really about going out and into the community, in different communities, and to reduce stigma and provide education and support. So I'm going to go on to the next. I believe there's one or two more polls. So yes, maybe, or no thanks another time. Maybe another time. Are you interested in learning how you can get involved with projects involving community engagement? Or maybe that's just not something that is involved with your work. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of you that work at NAMI, this is going to be a yes, but maybe it won't be. Okay, so we have someone that said maybe. Okay, so maybe you're interested in learning how to get involved in projects with community engagement. I really appreciate these honest answers because that's really, honesty is really the only way I'm going to best help you all and hear from you all. So thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. Oh, that was the last one. I thought there was one more. My apologies. So we are going to take a 3-minute break. So go ahead, get up, stretch your legs, use the restroom, whatever you need to. We're going to be back at about 3:15. And then we don't have too much more. We're going to be going over some case examples. And then we're also going to talk about some key takeaways, okay? But please don't, if you need to leave, I totally understand, but I would love for you to stay for the whole thing. And if you haven't been an active part of the conversation yet, we would love to hear from you. So we'll see you back in about 3 minutes. All right, welcome back. I hope you all were able to stretch your legs and your back and you're ready for the rest of this webinar. So welcome back. We're going to move on to part 2, and there is a break between part 2 and part 3, but both of these parts are so short that I think we can just do without the break because you all just had a break, so hopefully you're all good and ready to go. So let's take a look at some examples. So the first example we're going to look at of community engagement is NAMI Sacramento. So their project goal was to better engage with African American Latino communities. So this has been some examples of racial communities that NAMI Sacramento had really not been able to serve and reach out to. And so that's why they wanted to reach out, because they're systematically underserved communities, and so they wanted to reach out to them to better serve them, especially in the mental health arena. So basically what they did is they put on a cultural mental health fair that was actually in partnership with NAMI CA to do a mental health 101 presentation and invited members from these different community groups with a focus on the African American and Latino population. And afterwards, individuals from those communities actually expressed an interest in becoming presenters and doing trainings and presenting, mental health 101. And so it was really awesome because the presentations, what we've really found here at NAMI California through the research that we've done is that when you have our own voice or mental health 101 or any presentation, whatever it may be, it is much more effective if the presenter is a representative of the target audience. So if you're trying to reach Latinos, it would be best to have a fellow Latino or Latina to do the presentation, or maybe the community would like to have it in Spanish, but ultimately someone that shares a similar cultural identity and background. And of course, this can't always be the same, especially if you have individuals from multiple diverse groups within certain workshops. But it really is a great idea to have. And so the more you can get individuals involved from different communities, the more they can help to reach out to those communities as a trusted individual. So 2 months later, these individuals actually conducted, they were trained first and then conducted these mental health 101 presentations for their communities. So now they're going to be even able to further engage with Latino and African American communities because they have these presenters who are representatives of those communities and who are going to be most likely seen as more trusted individuals to those communities because they are considered insiders in those communities, rather than having someone who is someone who is white going into the African American community, and there may be more skepticism because they're most likely going to be considered an outsider with pertaining to racial identity. So that was really awesome that they were able to do that. Another one was NAMI California and the Cal Mesa Stigma and Discrimination Reduction Program or Initiative. And so basically what they wanted to focus on was prevention and early intervention in the mental health system to reach basically diverse communities within California. And so it was a collaboration between a bunch of organizations, and the end product ultimately was the In Our Own Voice. And so I'm sure some of you have seen these videos, and so they're In Our Own Voice videos that are created by and feature culturally diverse consumers and communities, because historically in NAMI, it's been a very white organization, white racially, and so one of these initiatives was to really try and branch out from that and get individuals not only that are diverse in their racial aspect, but in their gender identity, in their sexuality, in their socioeconomic status, in their culture, and all those different kinds of, in almost every way that you can be diverse or non-mainstream. We're really trying to tap into those populations who have been systematically unserved or underserved. So these are just examples, and I think these are great photos to really get you thinking about your audience and how it is so important to have representatives from these different audiences and diverse communities to speak to, to really say that, to kind of, what am I trying to say? To really break that stigma within the community and to be a trusted individual. Because if you have an outsider come in, like I've talked about before, there may be some distrust. And so using individuals from all different backgrounds to reach out to their own communities and to other communities as well is going to be really helpful. So these are just some of the individuals who have self-disclosed that they suffer from mental health challenges and really want to, break the stigma and talk about it, and are in every community, however you want to define community, but also has different perceptions of mental illness, and sometimes stigma may be stronger in certain communities as opposed to others, and so that's why it's so helpful to have individuals from all different backgrounds talking about this issue so that, they can connect with someone on a deeper level, or someone may see them and identify more with them because they share a racial identity or they share a gender identity or what have you. So let's take a look at some more community examples. So I want us to just remember this graphic and really just think about how, how your projects apply to this continuum and where you want to be. So at what level are you trying to engage the community? What is working, and how can we apply it to other projects in the community? So these are really just some more photos to get you all thinking about tailoring your message, and how would you tailor your message if these individuals were your audience members? And of course, we want to stay away from stereotyping, but we also want to, be culturally relevant and actually provide resources that represent that individual, and that individual can feel like they're a part of, and that they are going to be trusted and taken seriously, and really just understanding that people, I think, what is the phrase? I know there's I'm probably not going to say it right, but the phrase that mental health doesn't discriminate, but people do. I think that is very, very accurate for what we're seeing here, and just understanding that, as you all know, mental illness affects everyone. And it doesn't discriminate between people, but unfortunately people sometimes do discriminate because of mental illness or because of other identities. And then finally, this is really great to just look at all these different communities, even within NAMI. So these are from NAMI walks, and from all over, I think Honolulu's one, Hawaii, and in Kentucky, that's the other one. And so it's just really key that we're trying to connect and respect each other and the views of each other, and while respecting the relationships with each individual in the audience, to help that participant really embrace what we're sharing in a meaningful way that's applicable and relevant to them. So I'm going to briefly touch on this, but I hope you all know that you can send me a question at any time. But if you have any thoughts or questions, please let me know, and I can try and respond to your questions. I know I have a couple of questions right now, and I will respond to those actually in just a moment. Oh, actually, sorry, I just saw a really good one that I want to respond to right now that I think is relevant to all of us. So, one individual typed that they were involved in a suicide prevention engagement, and it was very emotional for that individual, since there were 3 family members of that individual who's telling me this that had taken their own lives. And after her or his emotional reaction, that individual was left out of, let me just read the rest of this, was left out of future collaboration meetings. Wow, I can only begin to imagine that. That's really, really hard. And I don't know, obviously, the whole circumstances of that. Perhaps this is something we could also speak about further, but I would just say that that's where I can't even begin to imagine how hard that was, and that your reaction, I'm assuming, was most likely completely, valid, especially based upon your lived experience. And I'm really sorry that caused you to be left out of future collaborative meetings, and that's definitely. I think that is something that's especially hard, here at NAMI, because we, on a daily basis, are talking about issues that are, for most of us, very, very personal. I would say the vast majority of individuals who are involved with NAMI are involved because they either have lived experience with mental illness or have very close individual in their life who has experienced it, or maybe are just very, empathetic towards the cause. But I would say that that's really something that can be very hard to balance in our work here at NAMI, is this idea that, we are a professional organization, but at the same time, the topics that are here at hand are very, very emotional, and we do need to, leave room for those emotions and understand that our work is very emotionally driven. And I'm just so sorry that happened, and I would love to follow up with you further. I'm speaking to the individual with you further, and thank you so much for sharing. That's really, really hard. And so I hope that, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that wasn't at NAMI, but if it was, things like that do happen, and hopefully we can learn from it and move forward, because that is really unfortunate, because no one should be, cut out from NAMI, or really from any mental health organization, because of, being triggered through very, emotive presentations. That's perfectly normal and likely to happen. So thank you so much for sharing that experience. And I really am sorry that happened, and I can only imagine how hard that must have been. Okay. So thank you again for your comments. I really appreciate that. And like I said, I would love to follow up with you further, but I also want to say that, definitely take time during this presentation to address that, and I really thank you. So I'm just going to type back to this individual very briefly. So thank you all for your patience. Okay, so thank you all so much for sharing your honest thoughts, and that's really what makes these, webinars really powerful, and what helps people to learn. So for the individual that shared that, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So we're not going to take a break right now. We are going to go on to, these were some of the last really key points to take away from this presentation. We don't have much more, and I was hoping to get you all out in a little bit less than the 2 hours, so hopefully we can do that. So when we're thinking about community engagement, it's really important to think about possible breaks in communication and where some lack of trust can come in. So just through misunderstandings, a mismatch of goals, and really understanding that in order for, what I've been stressing this whole time is that in order for your community engagement to be effective, it actually needs to, be effective and relevant for, or excuse me, it has to be relevant for that community in order to be effective and actually create lasting changes. So when we're navigating these challenges within communities, we really need to have the goal of creating a safe and trusting environment. I would say the one tweak I would give to this is that while, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the idea of safe spaces, safe spaces can kind of give a false sense of a certain kind of safety that's really not there. And so I would say that I like the term brave spaces better because safe spaces are really created to help people feel comfortable when navigating challenging topics. And I think it also implies that, where no one is going to get hurt and those type of things. When in reality, when we're navigating, conflicts or talking about hard, subjects like issues pertaining to race and class and gender identity and those type of things, that instead we're trying to create a brave space, meaning a space where we may not all agree with each other, and some things that another individual says could possibly hurt us because we're talking about really challenging things. But at the end of the day, we're going to make this space respectful enough that people are going to feel brave enough that regardless whether or not people agree with them, they're going to be respectful of their views. And it's just so important to really not so much focus on the end goal, but to be curious and listen to what is being said and understanding that at the end of the day, you each may have different views or opinions on something, but it's just important to be open and curious to the process and not always trying to get an individual to where you want them to be, but rather to see the process and the discussion as a learning opportunity. And just some of the key factors, we've really discussed all these, but to effectively engage communities is, I like this because it really goes down the list. So first, identifying, the community, why you want to engage them, what you want to do, and then going from there to learn about them, and then outreach so that you can really start to understand the needs of that community, and eventually form some similar goals, for whatever project or community engagement you are seeking, and then eventually sustaining this process through an ongoing relationship. And ultimately being flexible, because it's one thing to engage a community and hear from them, but if you're not actually going to adapt based on what that community is telling you, then it's really not going to be an effective community engagement. Okay, so this, I think that we've gone over most of this. So I would say, though, one of the main points is to acknowledge differences. In trying to engage diverse communities, it can often be really easy to try and take almost a colorblind approach, in that, a colorblind approach would be someone saying, oh, I don't care if you're black, blue, purple, or white, I don't see color. And while that's really nice, and maybe in a utopian world we could live somewhere where we don't see race, and that would be wonderful, but the fact is that we do live in a world that is rampant with racism and sexism and classism and homophobia, and if we're not going to acknowledge that these differences and power structures and privileges exist, then we're really denying that, racism and sexism and all of these other things exist, and that's to deny someone's lived experience. So it may feel like the easier or more politically correct route to, say that take that colorblind approach, but it's really not helpful, and it's really just denying lived experiences of individuals. And ultimately, this quote really kind of sums it up, is that, you have your way, I have my way, and as for the correct and the right and the only way, it does not exist. And that really just helps to reiterate the focusing on the process, and taking the learning from that and understanding that, the end goal may change over time and you may not even reach the end goal, but to value the process in itself. I love this graphic. So take a quick peek. If you're not, if you're just listening to this webinar in the background, definitely take a quick peek at this and look at the squares A and B. And so just take a look and, okay, are they the same color or are they different colors? Squares A and B. So I would say for this graphic, I would say they're obviously different. But let's take a look at the next slide. So this is really just to show that opinions really are about perspective. So this is the same image, but there's a color bar there. So again, you have the image without the color bar on the right and the image with the color bar on the left. And so what basically is happening in this photo is that A and B are the same color. The squares are the same color. But without that color bar, your perception is skewed by the shadow of the cylinder. And so it makes it look like A and B are different colors, which is pretty crazy to think about. And really just helps to drive home the point that, our perspective is so influenced by our lived experiences, and we just have to acknowledge that when we're engaging different communities. So this stuff, we've really gone over most of this. I would say another thing that we haven't covered, but that's really important that I will focus on is this idea of making room for disagreements and conflicts and seeing them as opportunities. A lot of times we really like to, if we kind of feel a disagreement coming, or maybe there's someone in the audience who, during our presentation disagrees with us or says something to the contrary, it can be really tempting to want to remain in control and kind of quell that and dismiss it and just kind of let it go. But don't be afraid to, explore that conflict. And rather than seeing it as a conflict, seeing it as a learning opportunity to, hear another person's perspective. And maybe, if you're listening to them and their perspective, they're going to be much more likely to listen to you and your perspective. And, understanding that if you have someone who is expressing some sort of dissent with maybe what you are saying or with a view that has been expressed, opening that up and even asking other audience members, if you're giving a presentation or something, is this something that other people are thinking about, or what are other people's thoughts, and not being afraid to go on a little tangent about that, because if you dismiss that person's comment, it's most likely going to come back with a vengeance, because that person is going to not feel heard. They're going to feel dismissed, unimportant. They're probably not going to listen to anything you have to say for the rest. And so it's so important that even if it is a disagreement, to honor that and be okay with it. And finally, another important point in red, just the possibility that you can listen and you can be open and respectful to another person's view without sharing that view. And sometimes this is so much easier said than done, but it's just really important to, if someone is saying something that you're not agreeing with, or, that you think is completely wrong, just reserving the right to be open and to be respectful. And that doesn't mean you agree with them, but it means that you're able to have a more productive conversation and ultimately learn more and most likely progress more than if you just completely shut down because what someone is saying is something you don't agree with. not going to go over this again because we've really focused on that, but I would say this is a great image to have maybe a printout of or something like that. You can just Google levels of community engagement, and I'm sure this image will come out, or a similar image. So because I've seen this a lot before in kind of different forms, but it really helps to give you a good idea, and especially when you're doing planning for community engagement. So some of the key takeaways is I will tell this little story that I think really kind of sums up what we're talking about today in a great way, and how these ideas of community engagement and creating and building trust and building a relationship and honoring these different lived experiences are why they're so relevant. So a lot of times, especially if we are not from a marginalized community, it can be very easy to think, wow, we've come so far in terms of, racism. It's not really an issue anymore. And, oh, healthcare disparities happened a long time ago, but they don't happen anymore. These biases don't exist and people are just making them up. And so I want to tell you a story about one of my friend's children. And so my friend and her husband, my friend is Indian from, as in Asia, India, and then her husband is African American, and so they have a little daughter, and she was in kindergarten when this happened, and so she went to school and came home and told her mom about this parrot that was there, that this girl had brought into the classroom, and the mom at first thought it was a real parrot, so she was very confused, she was very confused as to, what was going on and what her daughter was telling her. And the daughter was like, I really wanted to, pet the parrot and touch it. And then the mom's like, well, it's a real parrot, no wonder you couldn't touch it. And then the girl's like, no, it was just a stuffed one. Like, this girl brought it in. It was just so beautiful. I just wanted to touch it, And then I asked the girl if I could touch it. And she said no. That my hands were dirty. And so mom's like, were your hands dirty? Did you need to wash your hands? Because obviously they're kindergartners and those things happen. And so the little girl was like, no, I just washed my hands. And then that's when it dawned on the mom that the reason this other little girl wasn't letting this other kindergartner with darker skin pet her parrot is because she had somehow, through her lived experience, received this notion that having darker skin was related to being dirty. And this just broke her mom's heart because they're so young that this other kindergartner with lighter skin wasn't consciously employing racism because they were just simply too young to do so, but through their lived experience as an individual with lighter skin had been taught these norms, whether advertently or inadvertently, that this dark skin was correlated with something negative or dirty or bad. And so this really is to say that these are issues that happen every single day. And some of us, based on our level of privilege and our situation within the world and within society, some of us are going to experience those issues more than others. So, some of us experience these things on a daily basis and some of us don't because we are more privileged. And so all this is to say that, we need to understand that healthcare disparities and these biases are happening every single day. And they may not be in the same forms that they were once, but to understand that, microaggressions and racial profiling and healthcare disparities are still huge issues that need to be acknowledged and need to be combated. Okay. So this is once again, just if you have any questions, please let me know. And finally, some take-home points. So to really collaborate effectively with communities, it's just so important to understand that our lived experiences are going to impact how we interact with one another in the world. And that it may take a while to build trust. And when I'm saying that our lived experiences impact how we act in the world, this could be, as large as maybe trauma we've experienced, or whether or not we've had privilege of certain, educational aspects, or so many other things. But it can also be as simple as if we think about, it's Monday morning and my alarm didn't go off, and then I spilled my coffee on myself, and as I was driving to work, I had a car honk really loud at me, and I didn't even do anything, and so I kind of am like put in a bad mood, and I'm not like feeling super open and welcoming, and so maybe when I go into work and that one colleague, says hi, maybe I'll just kind of like look up and won't really look at them. And that individual is going to, maybe be like, oh, what did I do? Why aren't they saying hi to me? When in reality, that person's lived experience is that they've had a really bad morning and maybe they just don't feel cheery enough right now. But this is all to say that everything that happens in another person's life and their lived experience affects how they interact with you and others and the world at large. And to take that into account, especially the impacts of trauma. There's a lot of studies being done about how trauma can actually change brain structure. And so understanding that these lived experiences are impacting how people are navigating and interacting in the world. And so if they may not, if certain communities may not trust you, it is most likely because they've had some sort of a lived experience that has caused that. And so to ultimately focus on this as a process and understand that, communities may not trust you right away if you're an outsider, but through time and through work, you can build that trusting relationship. And you just have to be willing and open to nurture that relationship so that you ultimately can have stronger and more effective outcomes. And this is really just to drive home the point that it's really about understanding each individual's strengths and what their needs are and how you can harness those strengths to serve their needs. And so really just knowing, the individual that you want to reach and knowing the community that you want to reach and really ultimately working together to create effective programs for individuals from all different sorts of communities. And so I love this. Together we can bring lasting positive change, because ultimately that is what community engagement is all about, is bringing sustainable and lasting positive change. Some of the information, if you want some more, there are the principles of community engagement. There actually are 9 principles which have been developed, and we really kind of covered all of them, not explicitly, but you can find themes of them all throughout this presentation, but really in a succinct way. It kind of gives you an outline almost of the steps of community engagement. And just, I want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day. I know you all are super busy, and I thank you so much for valuing cultural competency and engaging with diverse and different communities. I love that this is something that you all are valuing, so thank you so much. Again, my name is Catherine, so my email right there is right here where my where my mouse is, excuse me. And so Catherine at namica.org. So I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow morning. What's going to be included is a recording of this presentation. So if you would like to share this with any of your colleagues who are not able to attend, you can definitely do so. It'll be on our YouTube channel, so I'll send you that link. I'm also going to send you a follow-up post survey so we can get your feedback, because I really like to constantly tweak and tailor the presentations based on feedback from our audiences. So, we would love to hear from you so we can make this the most effective presentation possible. And then finally in that email, I'll also be including information about other cultural competency webinars, as well as the Multicultural Symposium. If you are interested in cultural competency, cultural responsiveness, engaging diverse communities, I would really highly recommend the Multicultural Symposium. I know that the NAMI conference can be very costly, and so only some people are able to afford that. And so the Multicultural Symposium being free and having just as awesome speakers as the conference, I think that's something that definitely really needs to be taken advantage of, and we've opened it up. It's currently not invite only anymore because we really want to get as many people as possible. So I'll be sending out a link to that if you would like to register. It's going to be in Monterey on May 31st. And so we would love to see you there. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time. I'll be following up with you all. I'm going to be staying on here for about 5-10 more minutes. So if you all have any questions, you can go ahead and shoot them off to me. Alternatively, just shoot me an email. I'll actually go back to the page where my email is on. And then if you have any general NAMI questions, you can just do it to NAMI California at namisay.org, or just shoot me an email and I can try and answer your questions. So yeah, just let me know and I will be on the line if you have any other questions. As well, I will definitely be following up with you all. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I look forward to speaking with you all further.